Saving the Tree of Music. African Blackwood is one of the most historic and iconic tree species in the world. It is the national tree of Tanzania, and in Swahili-speaking regions it is known as mpingo. Musicians call it granadilla, and scientifically it is Dalbergia melanoxylon. It is one of the most prized and expensive woods in the world, and is known as the tree of music because of its international use in the manufacture of woodwind instruments. Because of its distinct tonal and machining properties, users of the wood often describe it as irreplaceable. Unfortunately, because of widespread use, it is becoming endangered, and users in all sectors are searching for substitutes, many of which lack the properties for which mpingo is so well known. In order to address the widespread depletion of this important resource, the African Blackwood Conservation Project was founded in 1996 as a collaboration between a Tanzanian botanist, Sebastian Chua, and U.S. woodworkers James Harris and myself, Bette Stockbauer. To my knowledge, it is the only long-term planting program for Dalbergia melanoxylon in the world. In this presentation, I and my fellow presenters, Michael and Cyril Chua, who are the sons of Sebastian, will describe the work of the ABCP, present a brief history of the species, and discuss its current conservation status. When the ABCP began its work, Sebastian Chua was well equipped to become a leader in such conservation initiatives because he had been working for decades doing similar work on Mount Kilimanjaro. His family land is on the southern slope of the mountain, and his father, Michael Iwaku Chua, was a botanist and herbalist who researched and recorded the fauna and flora of Kilimanjaro and educated his neighbors about the local plant species which could be utilized for domestic purposes such as food and medicine. He would often take Sebastian with him on botanical surveys, so Sebastian learned early the names and uses of the many plants of the Kilimanjaro ecosystem, and as a child he had already established a tree nursery. As he grew to adulthood, he was acutely aware of the degradation caused to the Kilimanjaro ecosystem by wildfire, land clearing, and resource exploitation. He was well aware that the health of the mountain was responsible for the health of the plants, animals, and people who lived along its vast watershed. To address this problem, he and his wife, Elizabeth, who was a district school teacher, inspired curriculum studies in conservation and the founding of numerous school and community groups which established tree nurseries to provide seedlings for forest restoration. Villagers and school groups alike would regularly organize tree planting initiatives and conduct educational programs to inform and inspire those who lived on the mountain to take steps to protect its resources and to help replenish its tree cover. Sebastian had also watched the decline in numbers of mpingo trees throughout the years. Mpingo is a lowland species and was once widespread in the plains beneath the mountain. Due to land clearing, population growth, and large increases in its commercial use since the 1950s, the tree, which was once abundant, had become increasingly rare and commercial stands no longer remain. Within Africa, the tree has traditionally been considered too difficult to grow from seeds, but Sebastian developed a system of germination and cultivation that had a high success rate for seedling production and survival. His replanting efforts for the tree began in the 1980s. In 1992, a BBC documentary called The Tree of Music was the first to raise concerns about the dwindling sources of mpingo and the threats to its future. It featured Sebastian's concerns and his beginning work in mpingo cultivation. Showing his first nursery to the BBC film crew, he said, quote, "My 200 seedlings are obviously not enough to make much difference compared to what is being lost, but next year I hope to have 20,000 seedlings to plant. It is vital for me to act now rather than wait until the future when things have reached a crisis," unquote. It was this video which inspired the founding of the ABCP. When James and I saw it, we contacted Sebastian and formed a plan. The intent was to establish a tree nursery in Moshi, a township to the south of Mount Kilimanjaro, to find protected places where the trees could be replanted, and to educate the public about the international importance of the species. A nursery shelter was built that could accommodate over 10,000 seedlings. And an mpingo tree orchard was planted so that seeds could be later harvested. With the founding of the ABCP, Sebastian and Elizabeth established new liaisons with school and community groups in the plains below Kilimanjaro, and that is where the ABCP presently conducts its activities. This map shows those districts. Since its early years, the ABCP has been systematically producing and replanting 10 to 20,000 seedlings each year. They are primarily mpingo seedlings, but also include indigenous hardwoods and species for domestic use and landscape remediation. Mpingo as a legume is a nitrogen-fixing tree and improves the soil wherever it is grown. It is an excellent species for interplanting with farm crops. ABCP seedlings have been replanted primarily on school and church lands and by citizens on farm and private lands. The ABCP also inspired the founding of several women's groups which started their own tree nurseries and organized distribution networks. In 2008, a large-scale planting was established at Makuyuni, a township west of Moshi, which allocated a part of its community land to the planting of mpingo. With funding from the Good Gifts catalog, Sebastian worked with local officials to clear and replant this area with mpingo trees. In 2012, he worked with the Police Academy in Moshi to establish an mpingo planting program on some of the acreage owned and managed by that institution. Those trees are now seed-bearing. By 2014, Sebastian and Elizabeth's total outreach since they began had been responsible for the planting of almost 3 million trees. For his lifetime accomplishments in the field of conservation, Sebastian was awarded an Associate Laureate from the Rolex Awards for Enterprise, the Arbor Day Award, and the Spirit of the Land Award presented at the 2002 Salt Lake City Olympics. The following is a video that was made by Michael and Cyril to show an overview of the work of the ABCP.
Trees have been a part of our planet for millions of years. They are some of the oldest and largest living organisms on Earth, and they have played a vital role in shaping the world we live in today. From providing us with oxygen to stabilizing soil and water, trees are essential to the health and well-being of our planet. The ABCP has been dedicated to ongoing replanting programs for the species in northern Tanzania, an area in which it once thrived but is now commercially extinct. In order to raise awareness about the international importance of the tree, it has instituted educational programs and enlisted the assistance of other concerned conservationists who have assisted in replanting efforts for the species. through the cooperative efforts of schools, churches, municipal organizations, and private landowners. The ABCP has distributed several 100,000 mpingo seedlings from its tree nursery in Mijongweni to the different parts and region of MT Kilimanjaro. In addition to African Blackwood, its nursery also supplies indigenous tree seedlings for domestic use to improve the standard of living in communities where we work and for environmental remediation in the MT Kilimanjaro watershed. But despite their importance, trees are facing increasing threats. Deforestation, climate change, and pollution are all taking a toll on our forests and the species that depend on them. In some parts of the world, entire forests are disappearing at an alarming rate. But there is hope. Over the past years, efforts and commitments have enabled to secure the environmental resources to continue regenerating such rivers, rainfalls, improved soil condition. This helps to improve community livelihood such as timber supply, crops cultivation, building infrastructures like bridges. All of this enables the community to sustain around the slopes of Mount Kilimanjaro towards the other parts.
Before describing the present-day work of the ABCP, I would like to briefly outline evidence of the historic uses of African blackwood during the past 5,000 years as a highly valued commercial wood species and discuss its present conservation status. A 5,000-year history of Dalbergia melanoxylon. In an investigation of the historic and archaeological sources containing mention or physical evidence of mpingo, it is likely that 5,000 years ago there were numerous stands of the tree along the eastern coast of Africa from Ethiopia and Eritrea in the north to Mozambique in the south. Most compelling are the extant sources from the time of the Egyptian pharaohs beginning in 3200 BC. It must be noted that there is more than one source of black-colored timber growing in eastern Africa, and that only scientific testing can establish exact identity. Therefore, some of the mentions below are suggestions without actual scientific backing. Pictured here are engraved tablets that have been verified as being made of African blackwood. The one on the left is ascribed to King Menes, circa 3150 BC, and the one on the right to Emperor Den, circa 2970 BC. Mpingo was also used in temple construction. These photographs show dovetail splines 5 feet in length, which were found still intact, holding together foundation stones at Medinet Habu, the temple of Ramses III, who reigned from 1186 to 1155 BC. These have likewise been verified as African blackwood. On the upper right-hand side of this mural in the temple of Ramses II, circa 1303 to 1213 BC, are depicted slaves and porters carrying logs of blackwood and ivory tusks to be delivered to the workshops of the king. This mural from the tomb of 2 Egyptian artisans, circa 1320 BC, shows the milling of blackwood with the log tied securely to a post. On the right, workers are carving funerary objects known as djed pillars, associated with Osiris, the Egyptian god of the afterlife. This mural from the tomb of the nobleman Rekmir in the same era shows a cabinet holding such objects. But most exquisite of the tomb findings have been the intact artworks found in tomb and temple excavations, particularly that of King Tutankhamun, who lived from 1341 to 1323 BC. Because his grave had been previously undisturbed, when it was excavated in the 1920s, numerous furniture pieces, game boards, art objects, and walking canes fashioned from Dalbergia melanoxylon were still perfectly preserved. On the left is a small blackwood chair, probably built for the king as a child. On the right is a cabinet with carved hieroglyphs. On this slide are a blackwood stool on the left and a Senate game board on the right, both inlaid with ivory and gold. There is also evidence of the importance of Blackwood in written sources. The Amarna letters are a rare archive of over 300 diplomatic letters inscribed in cuneiform on clay tablets that were exchanged between the ruling houses of Egypt and 7 nations in Mesopotamia during a period of no more than 30 years, around 1300 BC. They contain military and political discussions, and for our purposes, numerous mentions of gift and trade items exchanged between the royalty of these nations. Many of the items discussed were furniture and art objects that were noted as being made of ebony, as Blackwood was then called. In modern times, important physical evidence of such elite trade from this exact period was discovered in 1982 when a sunken ship from this era was excavated at a site off the southern coast of Turkey called Uluburun. It yielded 17 tons of valuable artifacts amounting to 15,000 items from 12 different cultures, indicating that it was destined for a royal court or highly ranked official. One item found was a golden scarab bearing the name of Queen Nefertiti. Also recovered were sword hilts decorated with Blackwood, and, remarkably for our story, were found the remains of about 24 logs that were scientifically verified as Dalbergia melanoxylon. A later shipwreck off the coast of Kenya was excavated in 1976. It was identified as a Portuguese trade ship which had capsized in 1697 near Fort Jesus, a Portuguese military stronghold at Mombasa. Among the artifacts were found 200 logs of African Blackwood. These could clearly be identified as trade items because they had the initials of their owners carved into the end grain. The photograph on the left is of a Muslim pulpit, or minbar, which was built in 1139 AD for a religious leader. Called the Marrakesh minbar, it was constructed of more than 1.3 million pieces of wood, including African Blackwood. The Renaissance cabinet pictured on the right was built in 1585 AD for a cardinal who would later become Pope Sixtus V. Standing 13 feet tall, a restoration project in 2005 revealed that all of its exposed surfaces are veneered with African Blackwood. It has been described as one of the most remarkable pieces of furniture in the world. These are only a few of the mentions in historical documents that show the significance of Dalbergia melanoxylon through past millennia. In modern times, there are 3 primary users of the wood. Instrument manufacturers use it in the production of woodwind instruments, such as clarinets, oboes, flutes, and bagpipes. The indigenous carvers of East Africa produce carvings from Blackwood, utilizing its natural forms and contrasting sapwood to create exquisite pieces of art. Often sold in curio shops catering to tourists. A third contemporary use is by ornamental turners in Europe and the U.S. who produce highly machined art objects utilizing mpingo's hardness, oiliness, and durability. All of these users are now experimenting with different species because of the lack of supply of African Blackwood. Conservation status of African Blackwood. In modern times, African Blackwood is regrettably facing the same fate as numerous other plant and animal species worldwide. Because of an exploding population and a rising middle class with increased purchasing power, resources the world over are becoming exploited, all too often to extinction. During the last few decades, the only remaining stands of mpingo suitable for commercial use have been in southern Tanzania and northern Mozambique. Until 2003, these areas had been somewhat protected because two major rivers made it difficult to transport lumber to the commercial ports of Dar es Salaam and Zanzibar. However, with the construction of bridges spanning both of these rivers, access to these last stands of mpingo became easy and has precipitated a huge increase in timber extraction throughout these two crucial mpingo habitats. In 1998, Dalbergia melanoxylon was designated on the IUCN's Red List of Endangered Species as near threatened. It now has an additional notation that reads, needs updating. The original assessment was based solely on written sources because there were few national funds available for direct investigation in the field. It is widely acknowledged that this designation greatly understates its true conservation status. CITES is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. It is a transnational agreement between participating nations to enforce trade regulations for the protection of a designated list of vulnerable plant and animal species. Dalbergia melanoxylon has been seriously considered for a CITES listing twice, once in 1994 and again in 2016. In 1994, a proposal was put forth by Kenya and Germany to regulate the trade in Blackwood, but it was never ruled on because of lack of agreement between the countries likely to be impacted. By 2016, however, the conservation situation for numerous species of flora and fauna had reached a critical peak, and another proposal was submitted. In an historic move that made conservation history, CITES members passed the most far-reaching measures ever adopted by agreeing on a decision to include all Dalbergia species under its regulatory mandate. This amounted to over 300 tree species, one of which is Dalbergia melanoxylon. Present-day work of the ABCP. Since Sebastian's passing in 2014, the work of the ABCP has been continued by Elizabeth, her brother Dismas Macha, and Sebastian and Elizabeth's sons, Michael and Cyril Chua, who are the third generation of conservationists in the Chua family. They continue to expand the outreach of the ABCP to school, church, community groups, and private farmers and citizens. Since the early days of the ABCP, conservation awareness in all sectors of society has accelerated, with new government programs and local groups taking advantage of today's tools and skills to integrate conservation into many sectors of community life. Our Tanzanian directors are forming liaisons with local environmental officials who help them in seeking out schools and community groups which are eager to cooperate in efforts to protect local ecosystems. Since schools and churches in Tanzania are often surrounded by large acreages, many use the planting of trees as an educational tool for their students and to build as well an environmental asset for the future. The ABCP is reaching out to such groups and work with them in supplying tree seedlings that will address needs on multiple levels. We work with environmental teachers in numerous schools and help with student education and advice on cultivation and long-term care of tree seedlings. In the following video is shown a step-by-step procedure used by our team in Moshi that has been successful in producing healthy mpingo tree seedlings.
Planting African blackwood trees from seeds to mature trees requires patience, time, and the right growing conditions. Here is a step-by-step guide to planting African blackwood. 1. Collecting seeds. The first step in planting African blackwood trees is to collect the seeds. African blackwood seeds are usually found in the pod of the tree. Wait until the pods have ripened and opened on the tree, then collect the seeds from the ground and dry them. 2. Preparing the soil. African blackwood trees prefer well-drained, organic loam soils. Prepare the soil by mixing it with compost and loam soil to create a light, airy texture that will allow the seedlings to grow. 3. Sowing the seeds. Soak the seeds into a warm water for 2 hours and sow the seeds directly in the prepared soil, spacing them about 1 inch apart. Cover the seeds with a thin layer of soil and then water the area well. 4. Germination. African blackwood seeds take about 15 days to germinate. Keep the soil consistently moist during this period and make sure the seeds receive plenty of light, and cover the seed bed with a transparent sheet to allow light to pass and also keeping warmth. 5. Transplanting seedlings. When the seedlings are 6 to 8 inches tall, transplant them into individual seed bags/containers filled with organic soil mixed with manure. Keep the soil moist and the seedlings in a warm, bright location. 6. Growing seedlings. Keep the seedlings growing in their seed bags/containers until they are 12 to 18 inches tall. During this period, make sure they receive adequate sunlight, water, and nutrients. 7. Transplanting to field. After the seedlings have reached the desired height, they are ready to be transplanted to the field. Choose a well-drained location with full sun exposure. Dig a hole large enough to accommodate the seedling's root ball, and then gently remove the seedling from its container and place it in the hole. Cover the roots with soil and gently farm the soil around the base of the tree. 8. Watering and fertilizing. Water the newly planted African blackwood tree regularly, keeping the soil moist but not waterlogged. Fertilize the tree with a balanced fertilizer. 9. Maintenance. African blackwood trees require regular maintenance, including pruning, to ensure they grow properly. Prune the tree during the dormant season to remove any dead or damaged branches and to shape the tree. 10. Patience. Growing African blackwood trees from seed to maturity can take 70 to 200 years or more. Be patient and enjoy.
Following are some of the many community groups which have been important to our work. Mr. Kessie, in the bottom right photo, is the headmaster of Usongo Primary School. He's an avid conservationist who is involved in both village and school conservation work. Such dedicated teachers produce a ripple effect that impacts the larger community even beyond the school grounds. In the top photo, Fadili Kidaya, back row on left, is the headmaster of Ikuini Primary School. He has targeted a large area within the school complex that will be used for tree planting. Mr. Emmanuel in the bottom photo is the environmental teacher at Mungu Primary School. Here he instructs students on conservation and tree planting. St. Teresa's is an all-girls secondary school, and its staff and students have been planting mpingo on their school grounds since 2015. The teachers not only educate their own students about conservation, but sponsor outreach programs in the local community for tree planting activities. Here, Sister Mally takes Cyril on a tour of St. Teresa's mpingo orchard. Father Antipas Kilasara is the pastor of a church in Mtimhu village. He has been a prominent spokesperson in this area for instituting conservation initiatives for land reforestation and innovative farm practices, and is currently working with the ABCP to integrate mpingo trees as an important part of his land use planning. In the photo on the left, Father Kilasara shows Michael the church lands targeted for conservation. On the right, Cyril stands in front of a 5-acre plot of land designated primarily for the planting of mpingo. In this photo, Dismas and Elizabeth instruct school and village leaders who cooperated in establishing an mpingo planting program on an allocated area on the grounds of Kimashuku Primary School. Both villagers and students participated in this program. SMAM is an acronym for the Society of Mangalore Africa Mission. It is a church group with several missions in Tanzania. Their members have been highly influential in sponsoring educational seminars for organic farming, tree planting, and agricultural activities. They manage a large acreage called Butu Farm and are replanting mpingo seedlings from the ABCP nursery. On their experimental farm in Kwanyage, they teach villagers the basics of organic farming and show how a 1-acre farm can provide sustenance for a family of 6. The ABCP works actively with them in supplying tree seedlings for their important work. And in conclusion, for the past several years, the ABCP has been supported by a number of prominent woodwind manufacturers and musical advocacy groups in France. Buffet Crampon, Henri Selmer, Marigot, and F. Loret are woodwind manufacturers. CSFI is an advocacy group that sponsors and promotes musical activities within schools and the larger community throughout France. UNFI, APLG, and ALADFI are groups of instrument makers who share their knowledge and encourage music education. Each of these groups is dedicated to ideas of sustainability and the wise use of our natural resources. Further information about the work of the ABCP can be found on our website at blackwoodconservation.org. I thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Betty. It was an interesting talk. I'm just interested, when you talk about the Blackwood, is it in a way related to the ebony tree? I'm not sure. In a way, you know, when you look at the pictures, it almost looks more like a bush or a shrub than a tree. Does it kind of get to a major tree size? And in a way, the sort of structure of the tree doesn't lend itself to carving per se. I mean, it's quite a small diameter tree. So yeah, I guess the fact that it grows so slowly means it's a very dense wood. But yeah, just some sort of technical, what makes it such a good wood for making instruments?
Well, ebony is in the Diospyros family, so it's in a different family, but the wood is solid black like ebony, but it doesn't have the properties of African blackwood. It's more brittle and it tends to crack more. So the users of the wood, my husband was an ornamental turner, and that's a form of woodwork in which you turn a piece of wood and then you do intricate cuttings on the surface of the piece. And so that wood has to be able to not crack or flake off. So it is different from ebony. And the trees, yes, the trees tend to be pretty scraggy looking, frankly. And actually in the harvesting and turning them into blanks, instrument blanks, they say that, you know, often there's a 90% waste.
Yeah.
For that tree, which is, you know, but you know, that's the way it is. Some of them, Sebastian has sent us several pictures of very large trees. Cyril or Michael, would you like to say something? You live there with the trees. I don't.
Yes, Betty. Yeah, I could just add some. As far as Betty as said, the tree is actually, when it grows at the early stages between from 0 years up to 10 to 15, still it's more like a shrub form of, or a growth form of the tree. So until it goes further and matures, until in the middle of 2025, going to 30, it's now trying to give a complete form of a tree with having a trunk, a full trunk. But until it goes on up to 70 years, up to 80s, is where it becomes a fully matured tree with main branches, with a main trunk, which is also being expanding its diameter of the tree trunk.
Thanks,
And we also do have some trees of that kind, but they are actually found actually in the remote areas, because back in time, many of them, they are being cutting down due for the main uses. So up to now, you can still find some of them. It could be like in the most of the protected areas. You can find some of the main big trees.
And just a second part, if I can, is there, I mean, in terms of the harvesting, is there a lot of poaching that's happening? I mean, the people that are using the trees for instruments, etc., are they kind of legal in terms of what they're doing, or is it basically a lot of poaching that's happening to send the products overseas? Are they kind of, well, in other timber products, you have these sustainable forests that timber is only allowed to be taken from those specific forests which are sustainable, as opposed to from nature per se, and you know, affecting the wild populations, if I can call it that.
Well, there is, you go ahead.
Okay, to us here in our country, and as long as from the presentation, how it is said that the tree status now is being highly endangered, even going to critical endangered. So from the laws of our country now, is being strictly to harvest the mpingo tree. So from the even from the wood industry, from the timber industry, it's not among the list on the list of which of the trees that's being used to harvest or being used for any activities. Back in time, there were the normal rural people doing the caving activities. Those were the one who actually doing the poaching, going to the field and trying to find a big tree, matured one, and cutting some logs, going to do some cavings and to sell it to the tourists. But for now, they are being highly in demand, but they cannot be easily found in the field. So even also for the timber industry, they cannot even get access to it. But also, if maybe they could get access, but it's not being allowed for them to harvest the wood for commercial purposes.
There is one initiative in southern Tanzania in Lindi, and it's called the MCDI, the Mpingo Conservation Development Initiative, and they work with a number of villages in that area, and they have gotten that land certified by the Forest Stewardship Council, and so they're selling certified wood, and they're getting, you know, a better price for their for the tree per tree for the villagers themselves. But there aren't very many instances of that otherwise. One thing that's been a problem is that I hate to blame everything on the Chinese, but since the Chinese have come in, there has been a lot of illegal harvesting and such. So anyway, and you know, it's used for charcoal also locally. So that's a big problem. So part of what we're trying to do, you know, is educate people about the importance of this wood, so it's used in a wise way.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Betty. Thanks, Marty. Over to Andy. Thereafter, there's a few questions in the chat that we will entertain. Andy, listening to you, please. Your question.
Hi, thanks, Chris, and thanks, Michael and Cyril and Betty for a wonderful project and wonderful presentation. There are lessons in there for us all to change our thinking to proper long-term objectives, as Chris has mentioned. I'm no biologist, so forgive me if this is a dumb question after all, but with your soil preparation for your seedlings and when you plant them on, have you looked at how you can inoculate the soil with the mycorrhizal fungi that are associated with the soil of the healthy trees? I'm just prompted to ask this by a presentation we had here a few months ago, where we had an example of two, I think, candelabra trees. One was planted without any soil from a healthy, flourishing tree, and one had a sample of it. And the one that had the mycorrhizal fungi from healthy, flourishing tree had grown so much better. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you.
Actually, yes, yeah, that it does make sense. And actually, what we do for raising the seedlings, we actually use the proper soil that is being because what we do we have a certain place where we do make the anorganic matters, where we take all the organic matters, because we also have a farm there, so we are doing some livestock keeping activities. So we have the organic matters from such from branches, from leaves and other materials, but also using the organic materials from the livestock. So we do come and mix them together and put them along the shade until they decay and decompose. And that's when we come now and try to mix it together with our soil before taking the soil for the use.
Thank you, Cyril. Appreciate. Two questions, somehow related. Sachin asking whether the tree grows well in India because it's similar tropical region. And the other question from Cheryl Ogilvie, just asking if there's any other tree that it could replace this tree, I guess specifically also for music instruments. Those two questions, please. Michael, you've not said anything yet. Or Betty, Cyril, any one of you?
Yes, I have. I would like to know if anybody knows of trees blackwood trees that grow in India too, because most of the seed requests I get through the website are people who want to plant trees in India. And traditionally it grows in 26 different countries, but I don't know if the wood that is produced would be of instrument quality or whatever. And I have not been able to find any information on that. So if anybody out there knows, I would be quite interested in hearing about it.
Sachin,
Cyril,
you asked the question. Maybe Sachin have some information, or anybody that's got information, just raise your hand and come in, please. So you actually responded to both these questions.
Cyril, do you know anything about that?
Anybody?
No, I was just Googling on this issue. I think because, for instance, Ndumu is close as possible to Mozambique. Running around there with my students, I am sure I have seen the tree. I'm going to have to go back to those spots and to go and see whether it is the tree that I think it's a Dalbergia. So I am sure we do have them. We've also got the African banana tree. It doesn't produce bananas that we eat, but the seed pods look like a real banana, and that wood is also very hard. So give me chance, Chris. When I get back to Ndumu, I'll go back to the sites, and I'm sure there is one of these trees outside one of the schools in the Hlabalalingana area, and I would like to know, and it hasn't been touched. So maybe the community don't realize what that wood is used for, and it looks like it's quite an old tree. but I just need to double check that I have identified it correctly. But I would think there is other species out there that can be used instead of chopping down a 70-year-old beautiful tree. I don't know. My knowledge there is limited, but I'll go and do a bit of research when I get down
Cheryl,
there.
we'll
Sorry.
wait for you. Betty?
There are other species that particularly the instrument manufacturers are using. And they're also, Buffet Crampon has developed a composite type of material, and they're producing what's called a green, I think, clarinets. I'm not sure how many of their instruments they use it for, but they do have a green clarinet, which is made out of a composite of mpingo sawdust and whatever else they use. So, you know, that's another alternative. But they are experimenting with other woods. I think mopane is one that's very hard. I don't think it's black, but anyway, Cyril, do you know of any other substitutes?
Yeah, I think also there's also one among the species which is also closely to mpingo. I think the teak tree, the chlorophorus tree. I think it also have some nearly components of the mpingo tree, comparing to in terms of the toughness of the tree, the permeability of the tree, the strength. There are some experiments, there are some testing that are being conducted, but I haven't actually got the result of it. But they are trying to comparing the properties between the two species. I think they're quite a bit. They're quite a bit between them.
Thanks for
and
that.
the wooden banana tree. What is the chances of using that? They say it's an extremely hard wood, and I can see just by Googling that there are some musical instruments made from the wooden banana tree. This, I don't know if I'll be able to say it, is the Etadrop from Papma Codatum. I don't know. Just have a look, Cyril. Look under the wooden banana tree.
Okay.
The seed pods look exactly like a banana.
Okay, I'll take a look at that.
Okay, I think you can.
Maybe that's, I know Induma's got only one of those trees as well, on the closest to Eswatini and on the border of Mozambique. But I'll be very sad if all the blackwoods get chopped down. I know I love music, but geez, to lose a whole lot of trees just to make a musical instrument is worrisome. And that's near threatened, which is scary.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl, Betty, Cyril. I think you can follow up on this, also stay in contact with each other about that. And thanks for your input, Cheryl. A question coming from Sabine Rietmiller. Firstly, also, she's very impressed with the work you are doing, as I am. She's quite curious about the costs to keep these nurseries running and involving the schools. And added to that, I was also interested to know if you somewhere have started entering the carbon market with your reforestation programs. So one of the typical costs, and the other side, have you started entering the carbon market, please? Any one of you?
I have looked into entering the carbon market, and probably overall, anyway, I've looked into it and haven't pursued it very much. We don't plant that many trees compared to, you know, people certifying whole forests and all of that. It's something I probably should look into, but I just haven't done it. We haven't done it as of yet, but that is an idea.
Okay. Just to mention, Betty, I will link you with a friend of ours, Michele Menigan, who stays in Tanzania in Ruvuma. He's with the PAMS Foundation and also with the LCA. Also now looking at community programs and entering the carbon market. So potentially we can link you and discuss this. Michele is very clued up on this, and he's got a very interesting model for the community, based on the community processes. So we can follow up on that. But any one of you,
I would very much welcome that. I thank you very much.
Okay, we will do that. I will. I'm speaking to Michele on a very regular basis, and we ourselves are now looking at this model, how to ensure that the communities get the real benefit of the carbon market. So we'll get back to you on that one. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And then just an idea about the costs.
Well, we have probably been able to do what we've done because we have a lot of volunteers, frankly. So we have a pretty low overhead in terms of you know, some of the larger conservation projects, and we do have a lot of volunteers. So we keep going and keep trying to plant our trees, and everybody could always use more money, of course.
Yeah, of course. All right. Anybody else who would like to raise a hand, ask a question, make a comment? Also want to get to hear from Michael if there's anything he wanted to add it. Michael? Okay, Michael. I see your name, but I don't see your screen. Maybe there's a connectivity problem there, Michael. All right, then there you are.
Yes, I'm experiencing a network problem, and there's a cut off of electricity here. Sorry,
okay.
Could you come up again? I didn't get you.
No, I just wanted to hear if there's anything you wanted to add.
In addition, the mpingo tree can grow in various places. There are places that we are experiencing.
Sorry, Michael, it seems to me that there's a connectivity problem. I'll keep an eye on it, see if we can get you back in. Holly Magog, over to you for a question while we're trying to get Michael back live. Holly, if you can come in with your question, please. Must we unmute it? Oh, there we go.
Okay,
thanks, Holly.
I had to wait to be offered the unmute. So I actually just wanted to make a comment to everyone. And of course, Cyril, Michael, Betty, you can add on to this, but I had at the end of last year started learning about musical instruments and where they were being sourced. And the reason that learning started is I met a man who was, I guess, a scout for a guitar company in America. And he told me a whole story about how many of these instruments are made from unethically sourced wood. Now, he was one of the people searching for unethically sourced wood and made no doubts about it. And it was very interesting to hear that since musical instruments have been able to go into mass production, this has been something that a lot of them source these scouts, and they travel around the world and specifically find individual trees. So for example, they'll come into the forests here in East Africa and they'll find individual trees and pull those trees out one by one and get that wood sent back. So it is incredible when you think how many musical instruments, how many people think they're just going to learn the guitar, pick up the guitar and then put it in their cupboard and never touch it. So it is something that I've really become aware of and started looking into and listening to podcasts about. But having this presentation from Betty, and I've came across them about 6 years ago when I did a project with the botanical gardens in Arusha. And just this presentation is so fascinating and really highlights to me, you know, the history of music, the history of trees, the history of playing music under trees, and the history of people, you know, both protecting and removing these trees, some for economic gain, some to protect the history. And I just think, Cyril, Michael, Betty, this is a fantastic presentation. And your little videos, Cyril and Michael, were amazing, really, really good. And thank you for opening the 60 people who attended this meeting's eyes today in what you're doing.
Thank you.
We agree, Ollie. Thank you. Really, I think it's fascinating and fantastic, and well done for what you are doing. Cheryl, you have one question, and then we're back into the questions in the chat, please. I'm unmuting.
Yeah.
Cheryl? No, Cheryl, you are not unmuted.
I got a question.
Yes, sorry. Cyril, you can answer in the meantime while we're waiting for Cheryl. Cyril, over to you. Cyril,
okay, I got the question. The question about the concerning the present threat on the African Blackwood. Actually, in terms of the animal, like such as an elephant, in the whole concern of the feeding succession, actually of the main herbivores in various areas, especially the protected areas, they are not quite a threat towards the mpingo tree, the Dalbergia. This is toward because of the systematic feeding or the proper way of feeding that the animal does, because the animal, they don't actually browse to the certain particular species for the whole time. When they take a bite from certain species, and then they move towards the other species. So, and actually this also giving the survival chance of the tree to continue towards furthermore, rather than being poached by humans, which is a critical threat towards the species. In the most of the protected areas here in Tanzania, you could notice or come across or come by various mpingo species around, being well in a good form and quite a standard. Like in some areas, you can find like a whole land across being filled with a lot of mpingos. This is a good sign, show that in these protected areas, they are well being equipped and they are well being maintained, and they are sure that the survival rate, it will be ongoing and from day to day.
Thank you, Cyril. Cheryl, your question, please.
Yeah, I was just Googling to find out which trees could easily be harvested for the same thing. And they're saying that cedar woods, you get guitars, soundboards, various musical instruments, but also the Combretum imberba, that's that leadwood that you can make a lot of musical instruments, and that's a foster growing tree. And the redwood is also a very good tree, and that also say they grow a little bit faster. But yeah, so maybe we should start not just growing blackwood, we must maybe start harvesting more of these species that I've just Googled, if they fit and are well thought of with people that make the musical instruments. Or maybe we're going to have to educate towards the sustainability of the tree. But I suppose it goes to according to the different sounds. So maybe try and just test and see which one would work instead of chopping down a beautiful 70-year-old tree.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I think they are already doing that. You know, a lot of the manufacturers and a lot of wood people in general are finding alternate woods. So.
No, absolutely, Betty. The one thing that I'm personally totally convinced of, and that is that the future and the protection of nature and our planet lies in the hand of everyone now. It's no longer we and you. It's both the user, the one who harvests, everybody. This is all hands on deck situation now. We got to think 360 and not just on one single thing. But yes, Cheryl, there are alternatives, and we should also look at the alternatives. Okay.
And actually, the instrument makers aren't responsible for the major uses of those woods. I think they use, you know, less than 25% overall. So they're not the major users of Dalbergia melanoxylon and a lot of the other instrument woods. So they have a larger percentage, a smaller percentage than other users do, put it that way.
Correct, but it is troubling listening to Holly. You know, if the instrument makers, and not just them, you know, it goes for everybody. The instrument makers, if they are looking for illegal ways to get to the wood, that's where part of the problem lies. So it's just that overall awareness that we need. But yes,
right.
totally.
I think the major manufacturers are not doing that, you know.
Yeah.
And they have been very interested in supporting our program. They've been a major part of our funding for the past few years. So they're quite interested in replanting and sustainability. And they're working with the CITES people. They have sent delegations to CITES meetings and trying to work things out. So so a lot of different initiatives
somehow my heart says to me, somebody who loves music and really is into the cultural side of things and the music side, I'm certain they would do the right thing, you know, because there's within that, embedded in there, is the cultural heritage. So yes, probably it's the odd one here and there, but let's just be aware. And thanks for creating this awareness. I think it is fascinating.